So recently I asked an atheist professor what the definition of atheism is, and this is what he said. Graham, so what is your definition of an atheist? I know that you wrote a book recently about this subject, but I wanted to hear you say it with your own words. What is the definition of an atheist?
Okay, so, well, it'll sound slightly provocative because we don't have the context here. So I think that properly we should define theism as the view that there's at least one God, and atheism is the view that there are no gods, and monotheism then as the view there's exactly one God, and we call that one God with a capital G. Atheists then are people who believe that there are no gods. And in particular, in our context, they believe that God doesn't exist. That's what an atheist is. There are other possibilities. There are agnostics, people who suspend judgment, so they believe neither that God exists nor that God does not exist. And there are innocents, people who, for whatever reason, don't have the concepts to formulate the proposition, so they just have no attitude towards it. So there's a kind of fourfold distinction. Other people like to say that atheism is just lacking the belief that God exists, which lumps together agnostics who, in the class of agnostics, right, with the class of atheists, if you define it that way, which I don't like. So I think that the right thing to say about atheists, the right way, no, that's not the right thing to say. People use the words differently. I think that it works very neatly if you choose to use the terms the way I do, but not everybody will. But what I mean when I'm talking about atheists is people who say that God does not exist.
Is it fair, Graham, for me to say that those who self-identify as atheists and want to define atheism differently than the way that you suggest it should be, and instead along the lacking a belief in God, conflate the metaphysical theses with the epistemic theses? So the literal Greek, right? Gnosis, not knowledge or not belief. That. So, because I don't, theists don't call themselves, gnosists.
No, that's right.
And define those who lack such a belief as agnostics. So it does seem to me that someone who is an atheist is making a declaration, not just about their own personal psychology or their personal noetic structure or beliefs, but they are instead saying, I believe that in the entire realm of that which exists, gods are not part of that domain.
Right. So the history of the terms is complicated. So when Huxley introduced the word agnostic, it was about knowledge, right? It wasn't about suspension of judgment between two propositions. If we could go back and rewrite history and introduce the terms at the beginning, it would be much more convenient, because the way that the terms have grown up, there are people who, despite what you just said, that people who say, I want to proclaim myself an atheist, I lack belief in gods. And now I want to distinguish amongst the atheists between the strong atheists who say there are no gods and the weak atheists who just say, I lack belief in gods. But there's also the question about whether you lack disbelief in gods too, because there are two poles here once we start thinking about belief. And so you end up, in order to identify all of the positions, I think the terminology is most simple and you get the kind of cleanest structure if you define it the way I do. Atheists then are people who believe that there are no gods. Atheists then are people who believe that there are no gods. Atheists then are people who believe that there are no gods.